Like Mo said, this is not a debate. We just want this to be a constructive and positive conversation among each other. Just a reminder, this is being live streamed right now on rocketcitynow.com. And we have a number of questions from our viewers and from our team. And our goal is to be wrapped up by 7 o'clock.
All right, we'll direct the questions to specific people once that person has responded. If anyone else would like to respond, of course, you physically just have to raise your hand, and we'll call on you later, just like the old school days, everybody. Now, when you're not speaking, please just mute your mic if possible, so we can get everything going smoothly. So let's get started, everyone. Our first question is for Captain McCarver. What has your message been to your officers about interacting with the public over the past few weeks and going forward?
Well, you know, it's I really want to let everybody know that the message that we pushed forward is really more or less to reiterate what we've tried to teach them to begin with, and that is that every single interaction that they have matters. You know, when they're out in the public and they're interacting with people, whether they're standing in line at McDonald's to get a hamburger, the look on their face, it really matters. And they need to take the time to have the interactions, positive interactions that really remind the public that our police officers are there for them. We are just a part of the community. We shouldn't ever be viewed as something separate. And that comes from the way that we interact and the way that we talk to the community, you know. And so really the message is to them has just been really pay attention to the little things. You can't ignore those little things. Get out there, make sure that you show the care and the empathy that brought you to this profession. You know, over time, unfortunately, it's a tough job, and they go through a lot of tough things. And sometimes we have to battle, them kind of being exhausted, so to speak, emotionally. And we have to recharge them and remind them just how important their duty is and how important it is to get out there and really be that caring, compassionate face for our city.
Now, following up from that, how have recent events changed how HPD is conducting a stop or an interaction just with the general public?
So again, you know, we always have trained our officers, when we interact with the public, whether it's a traffic stop or whether it's an arrest, the goal that we have set forward is one that, you know, we want our officers to make people's lives better. We want every interaction to be something that causes something positive for someone's life. That may be an arrest, that may be a ticket, but it very well may not be. Maybe it's cutting somebody a break. Maybe it's recommending that they see somebody who can help them in some other way. But when we do these traffic stops, unfortunately, some of our officers, they're assigned to traffic divisions where that's what they do day in and day out. It's easy, and they have to really fight off getting complacent where, you know, it just becomes a routine like any other person's job. We have to constantly remind them again that each of those stops is a very impactful moment for that person being stopped. While that officer may stop a lot of people in the course of his day or week, that person who gets stopped, that may be the one interaction they have in a year or maybe even their lifetime with a police officer. And that's how they will remember us all. And so they have to remember that each of those interactions are important, they matter, and they impact not only every Huntsville police officer, but every police officer in this country is impacted by their attitude and demeanor on those stops.
All right, following up from what Captain McCarver said, our next question is going to be for LATERRICA Shelton. I want to know, have you lost any confidence in police considering the current status of a lot of things happening within the state and the United States of America?
I wouldn't call it losing confidence in police. I think it's going back to of looking at the issues and really having the tough conversations to figure out how we can improve community and police interaction. I know that, you know, there's been a lot of conversations, what we're seeing on social media and online, but I think ultimately the goal is to figure out how we can improve our communities and the resources within the communities. So I wouldn't phrase it as losing confidence in police. I think just the dialogue of how can we improve communities in general, and police are a part of that conversation.
Okay, and we kind of have the same question for both Angela and Kenny. Has any of this caused you to lose confidence in police, or I guess policing systems, kind of like what Erica said? We can have Angela, you go first.
Okay. Again, I don't think it would be a lack of confidence. I see this as an opportunity. I don't think we've been at a place like this in our history with the country. So I think that we have an opportunity to move forward and collaboratively, and I don't know if that's always been the case. It's been an unspoken thing, but now we have the opportunity to demonstrate it clearly to everyone. It set a standard.
Yeah, this is about, for me, I'm going to kind of play off what Angela said. This for me is about opportunity in the midst of adversity. That adversity is being experienced both at the local level, the statewide level, and the national level. And this is an opportunity, I think, for people to catch their breath, take a look at what's going on, and take an opportunity to be able to push measures forward that will make the community a better place in terms of those relationships. And those communities where people have to coexist, and it doesn't matter what group of people they are. People are different. They come from different cultural contexts, different places of understanding. And in the context of those differences, there is tremendous common ground that people can stand on, as well as tremendous opportunity that people can explore. The key for me is, are people going to have the courage to reach across the barriers and be able to have those tough conversations like LATERRICA was talking about? And it's important for us to continue that, not just to react to it, but to be proactive and to be proactively engaged in strategic efforts in order to move that dialogue and those relationships forward.
Definitely. And I think that, you know, gives us the opportunity to do things like we're doing right now, having those kind of tougher conversations, but important conversations. And Kenny, we do have one more question for you. In Huntsville, do you see areas for improvement within, I guess, the policing sector?
There's always room for improvement. Based on what I just said, I don't think anybody should sit back on their laurels of success. Whatever we've done successfully in the past is a part of history now. But we should never forget that as we move forward, that there's still a lot of room in which people can grow. There's still a lot of room in which people can learn. And as long as people are open to those opportunities, that's a good thing to do. I often talk about the fact that when we talk about, and I'm going to talk specifically about this issue, as we talk about issues related to cultural diversity, equity, and inclusion, what we're really talking about is an opportunity for people to come together, explore those differences on a personal and corporate level. So on a corporate level, people might say, well, what can we do as an organization? And a lot of people will feel safe because the organization is responding to that. But I think people have to individually ask themselves, what are they going to do? What am I going to do in terms of addressing the issue and responding to some of the challenges that are facing? And I think when we are able to elevate the dialogue and the conversation to that level, then we experience better, more productive, and sustainable outcomes in the process.
Great, great, great. Okay, we're going to move on for a question with Officer Stevens. We got this viewer question. People want to know, what's the policy when in regards to officers wearing body cams?
Actually, our policy is anytime we have contact with a citizen, we're supposed to have our body cameras on. Any interaction from the minute we get out of the police car till it's over with. Most officers download their body cameras at the end of each shift. So it's stored away. So if there is a complaint or, something in question, internal affairs or their supervisor, whoever can go review it.
Okay. Does the same manner go for dash cams?
Yes, sir. They're supposed to be downloaded every day at the end of your shift or prior to the beginning of the shift.
Okay, so basically you're saying that like the information that's going into it, it's constantly updated and it's not like it's sitting there for a long
Yes.
time.
We have a specific policy. You're supposed to download all that stuff. So yes, it gets done rather quickly. And, you know, if there's some reason why it wouldn't be downloaded, would be obviously, you know, something wrong with it, a camera issue or whatever. And we usually, you know, report that immediately and get it fixed.
Okay, great answer on that one. As a citizen, that's really good just to know, because definitely did not know that prior, sir. All right, next question. Let's go to Miss Angela Curry. How do you expect to have the police do things differently when conducting maybe a stop, or such as reported car stolen or stopping that car?
Well, so for me, I'm sitting from a place of I know a little, but as with our request with asking for the policy manuals and department manuals will be placed online, myself as well as other citizens will know not only what to expect, but how in which we should respond, not to escalate the situation. But I do want to say that I feel that if officers treat every person, despite their color, their ethnicity, whatever the background, the same, and we have equitable treatment across the board, that would be huge for me. I think that police officers should use the technologies available to them. I think the clearance rate for stolen vehicles was like 45% or something from the annual report in 2018. But those traffic stops and what's expected during those encounters, knowing why I'm being asked to to get out of my car, those type things, I think we have to make sure that that's clear and that everybody knows what's supposed to happen, and then what we can do as citizens when those things don't happen.
Okay,
so transparency is definitely going to benefit the community.
Hey, Officer Stevens, we do have a question from Facebook when it comes to that data on the body cams and the dashboard cams. Altricia in Huntsville wants to know, how long is that data usually stored?
To my knowledge, it's stored forever. It's there. You know, we hang on to it because you got to take into consideration a lot of times that whatever you record on there, especially with the COVID-19 stuff, it's pushed a lot of court cases way back. So you might not actually go to court on something for 2 or 3 years down the road. So obviously you need to hang on to it as long as you can, where you know, if you need it, it's there.
Okay, great.
And Officer Stevens, I actually just have a follow-up that I'm curious about on that. So do they have to physically turn it on and off when they're about to have an interaction with someone, or is it just rolling all the time?
Now, usually, I mean, obviously, when you get in the car and you're driving down the road by yourself, you don't want your camera, you know, rolling. You might start singing or something. I don't know. But we always, you know, the policy is you turn it on before you get out of the car and make contact with somebody. And then when it's over with, you turn it off. So.
Okay. Yes, Captain.
Just a little added note to that. The cameras are, when they're on and they're wearing them, they are constantly taking in data. They are just dumping it if nothing occurs, right? So when they hit their button to begin to record, it will capture back sometime, right? And that's important because a lot of times something may occur quickly, and by the time you've hit the button, you've missed some important information, and so it is constantly taking in information. It's just not storing it all unless you hit the button.
Okay. And actually, our next question is for you, Captain McCarver. How are you planning on enforcing better practices for police, and what kind of training do you think could help in this arena?
Well, that's, because we've been doing a lot of these meetings, I've really heard some interesting thoughts and ideas. Right now, the way we do it is we have an early warning system. And that means if an officer uses force, if they have pursuits or use force, if they have so many incidents within a certain time frame, the internal affairs and their supervisor is notified, and that requires a review. So when that review occurs, they have to go back and they have to pull body camera, and they look to see how that officer performed during those events and others as well. So it allows us to sort of see what's going on. Sometimes it just so happens that an officer ends up in some of those situations It's just no fault of their own. They just happen to have that sort of string of luck. But sometimes those early warning systems show us when we're having maybe a problem with an officer. And so if that happens, what we do is there are several things that we can do and usually do, and that is either disciplinary actions, which our disciplinary actions our goal in those is to change behavior and to get them doing what they are expected to do. But another thing that goes on is retraining. That's the most important part. And so we send them back through really specific retraining that is, we usually tailor it to what their problem is. Sometimes we have issues where an officer clearly, is misunderstanding maybe something to do with Fourth Amendment search and seizure issues, right? And so we'll send them back to a very tailored course on search and seizure. Maybe it's that they're not de-escalating properly. We send them back to our VDI, which is short for verbal defense and influence courses, and back to our Virtua simulator to allow them to work through some of those very problems with an instructor who can then point out where their deficiencies are. And ultimately, if we don't see the improvement, if somebody just is not doing what they're supposed to, well, then ultimately those disciplinary actions would lead to a termination.
And do you think you guys will add anything, I guess, new maybe to the curriculum or training after all this year?
Well, I tell you, so let me just say that we're listening to the community. The state of Alabama requires a certain curriculum for police officers. We have to follow that curriculum. However, we can do more than that. We do. The state requires us to do about 13 hours of training for a basic police officer. We do 20. All right. But, ultimately, the question now that is being asked is the way that curriculum is set up, is it really doing what the community wants us to do? Right. So, do we need to spend more time on training regarding First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment law, state laws? We really probably need to enhance that. We need to enhance our training when it comes to, de-escalation techniques. We do a lot of it. In Huntsville, we do much more than the state requires. But my problem is, or my question is that even enough? I really think that if we want to improve policing, we need to really take a deep dive, really look at this, and let's talk about real changes. And real changes would include us spending more time on the things that are valued by our community, which are positive interactions. We need that. And so, yes, I can tell you that we are looking right now strongly at things that we can do to be better community servants.
And we are getting a couple Facebook questions. Let's see. How successful have you found the retraining? And either of you guys, I guess, can answer this, Huntsville, please. How successful have you found the retraining, and do you keep data on improvement after the discipline?
Yes, we do. And in fact, we had a meeting yesterday where we talked about something that we want to implement that we really haven't done as much as we should. And that is, once we go through that retraining, having, a constant review of body camera and things like that to make sure that training, I guess you'd say, stuck, right? That it had the impact on the officer that we wanted. But I will tell you that we've had great success. We look at our officers and we watch the growth over their careers. Again, we're talking about, the requirement for a police officer is a high school education and 20 weeks of training. So that leaves a lot of room for growth over the next 25 years of that officer's career. And we do see it, which causes me to point back to the fact that we probably need to do a lot more to prepare them and give them the tools that they need to be successful to begin with, right? Because the fact that we see such growth in them over those first 5 to 10 years, we see that those retrainings and additional training, just what an impact it has on them and how much better they get. It just tells us we really need to spend more time up front. And, I hope that the policing community across this country embraces more education and more training early on in our officers' careers.
Okay, thank you for answering that. We have a few more, but we'll get to those in a moment to spread these out. Angela, I have a question for you, but I do want to ask a follow-up question to something you said about people knowing their rights, I guess, as police officers. I've heard a lot about that sometimes people don't understand sometimes all things are being told, or, you know, they don't know their rights. Do you think it's important for people to educate themselves about their rights during an arrest?
I do. And that's one of the reasons, again, we want to have the policy manuals online, because that's something that we need to take responsibility for reading, studying, understanding. So when an officer does something that's within the policy manual, we are not doing it as a personal affront, but we understand what the process is. But then if the officer is not doing something that's in the policy manual, we also know that there needs to be some follow-up with that as far as a complaint or calling a supervisor and all of those type things. So yes, I think it's both. It takes everyone involved to make sure that we have a safer community.
Definitely. And then the question I have for you, I guess, is a little more personal. How old were you when you realized that white privilege was an issue for people of color?
And it came to me that something was different when on my first job. I was 16 years old, and this was in Florida. And some of the women that I was in high school, so the women that worked with me, some of them they had families, married, but we were all hourly employees. Well, there was an opportunity for a management position to come up. And one of the ladies, I remember her coming in on her off day to interview for this particular job. And she had been there for years. She would be in charge when the managers wasn't not there. And then at some point, there was a woman who had come from the town, white. The lady who I'm talking about, who had been there a long time, was black. This woman had never worked in this industry before. I think she was a friend of a manager, and she ended up getting hired. And then the woman who had been there all those years, the black woman, was responsible for training this woman and getting her up to speed. So that was my first experience where I knew that something wasn't right, you know, as far as white privilege, that there was privilege.
All right, thank you for sharing that, Angela.
All right, we got the same questions going for both LATERRICA and Kenny Anderson. Once again, how old were you when you realized that white privilege was an issue for individuals of color?
Well, I guess for me, I would even go further back. At a young age, maybe 5 or even younger, and probably couldn't frame it that way. But I remember going to the doctor's office and my mother making me sit still and be the most well-behaved child in the doctor's office, and seeing the white kids run around and play and just, you know, be kids. And I didn't understand what the difference was then, and I obviously was too young to frame it. But as you go older, you start seeing a lot of these differences of things you were not necessarily given the privilege of being able to do because of how society has already judged you. So there's this very specific burden placed on you to behave a certain way, so you don't fit that mold, so your mother doesn't look like, you know, she's unfit or whatever. And so even as a young child, you know that it exists, you can't frame it, but you spot that difference. And even now, I still spot things that I may not have even noticed, even as a professional, where, you know, it's like, whoa, okay. And so it's like an ongoing battle, learning process, or revelation that has happened really for as long as I can remember. So to that point, I mean, just as long as I've had a memory, I've noticed a difference. I may not have been able to put the title of whether it being white privilege or racism or anything like that, but I knew there was a difference, and I knew there were certain things that I couldn't do that kids that looked different from me could. And so it started very young.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I was struggling with the question at first because I was trying to remember a time I didn't acknowledge that there's white privilege in our society. But I'm going to take the same direction LATERRICA took. I grew up on the Lower East Side of Manhattan in public housing. My parents were essentially poor. They were laborers. My dad was a factory worker for 34 years. My mom cleaned houses. I remember her coming home, and the people's houses who she cleaned were oftentimes in Flushing Meadows, which is where the U.S. Open is played and where the Mets used to play at Shea Stadium. And she would just talk about their life being so different, you know, about the vacations that they would take, about the things that were in their homes. And I was always fascinated by that. I didn't feel I was getting left out of something, but I was just fascinated. I was like, you know, people really do that kind of stuff. You know, we didn't go to Disneyland, Disney World, Disneyland. We didn't have money to do that, but they were taking trips and flying places and doing all kinds of things. And I kept thinking, wow, you know, there's a part of our society that lives vastly different than the experience that I had. The one thing, of course, that was my rock growing up was that my parents, I lived in a two-parent home, and in spite of everything that was going on, that was my rock. That was my foundation. And I had two parents who loved each other, who remained married for over 40 years. And they laid a foundation for us that helped us understand that even though we didn't live in Beverly Hills, that we had a Beverly Hills existence in terms of our ability to connect with each other in terms of love, respect. And that was my first understanding of the fact that even though there were differences among people, that all humans had the quality of humanity, and that there was always something in everybody, regardless of where they were, to be able to show them a degree of respect, purely on the fact that we had the equality of our humanity, regardless of what our circumstances were.
All right, thank you guys both for sharing that. I'm going to get some of these Facebook questions that we're getting from earlier. I think maybe Officer Stevens, if you want to try to answer this one. Does a citizen have the right to request viewing body camera footage if they hear their members are involved in an incident or stop, and who decides who can view the footage?
Yes, ma'am. My understanding is you can request to see the footage of your stop. You would just need to go up to Internal Affairs and speak with them, and you know it's up to them whether they release it or not. A lot of times they're not going to if it's a pending investigation or you know a case or something. But that's something you can always submit your request to them.
Okay. Let me see if there's any others on here. Okay, this is also for probably Captain McCarver. As challenging and expensive as it is to recruit and train law enforcement officers, I imagine it's a difficult decision to have to let one go. How often does that actually happen? And then they said, without naming any names, can you describe what led to dismissals in recent years?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, the way we look at it is it's far more expensive to keep one who doesn't need to be there. So we've never really looked at it from the angle of what's most economical. When we have an officer who does something unethical or illegal or a significant violation of policy, we get rid of them. And I'll tell you, I hear a lot about, I think I hear it referred to sort of as maybe the blue wall of silence, or something to that effect, about that police won't turn each other in, so to speak. In my career, I've seen at least 4 times where officers have turned in other officers who were doing things illegal. And those officers were prosecuted in most of the cases. At the very least, they were fired. And those were officers who just didn't want to be a part of an organization who does that. And we talk a lot about, cops, people who want to be a police officer. When they come into this job, they come into a job that they believe is a very honorable profession. They come to help people. If they thought they were coming into an organization that was corrupt, where they were going to be allowed or expected, or where they've heard that unethical things are occurring, I would suspect many wouldn't want to show up here. They're going to try to find a department where the culture is right. And so I'm really proud of our department because of the culture. And because our officers try to do the right thing. I certainly won't sit here and try to tell you that we don't ever have things that go on that shouldn't, but if we find out about it or if we know about it, we certainly take the action, and we do not ever hesitate because of any economical factor.
Yeah, and you're talking about officers, reporting other officers. I mean, if you look at the George Floyd case with the other officers not, I guess, speaking up or doing something, do you encourage your officers to intervene if something like that is happening?
Absolutely. They're expected to intervene. You know, we are actually doing a policy review right now to make sure that that's in our policy. And kind of bouncing back, I know that Angela has made some comment about, you know, publishing policy. We're talking about that now, and really the conversation has just been, you know, why we're really proud of our policies, and you know, we don't have any reason not to publish them, and people can, they're already available under, you know, if someone requests the policy or it's subpoenaed, they can get it anyway. So, you know, what is the big deal really? And just like Angela said, the more that the public is aware of what we do and why we do it, the better. And so, you know, we want to work in that direction. Those are some things that we're looking at right now. But yeah, so yeah, those are certainly things that we're proud of.
Okay, thank you. And the next question is for LATERRICA. How diverse is the UAH student body, and what steps is the university taking to create more diverse? Oh, I think you're muted.
Still muted. The easiest way to answer that is to just really give you an idea of the numbers, and then I'll just go into the steps. But right now we're about 69% white, 9% Black, 5.1% Hispanic or Latino, and 3.5% Asian and 1% Native American. And that's for our student body. And then for our faculty, we're about 25% minority, and that's including our Black and African American faculty. But if you pull that out, we're about 6%. And then about 45% female faculty. Some of the states, the steps we are taking are that we're continuing to the work of enhancing and really looking at how we recruit, and talking about our commitment to recruiting and retaining diverse faculty. And that goes through, you know, training our employees on appropriate ways to ask questions during interviews and what they should ask, what they should not ask, being aware of biases, and also creating that level of accountability where we do have processes in place if things do not go as they're supposed to. And then also just really using our resources on campus to recruit diverse students. Working with our student affairs and admissions office, and then my office partners with a lot on campus on a lot of different initiatives, and just being a lot more intentional in recruiting underrepresented minority students to come to our campus, and also recognizing a lot of the barriers that are put into place that may be a challenge for some underrepresented minorities because of historical reasons such as institutional and systematic racism, and historical reasons why underrepresented minorities may not have been able to build wealth and accumulate a lot of the opportunities that a lot of our Navy white students have had. And so being more intentional in recognizing those barriers and trying to break them down and knock them down. And sometimes that does involve having those conversations with our campus partners and you know, partnering with the city of Huntsville and our Huntsville community to make sure that when students come to visit UAH, they feel welcome in Huntsville too. And so that's a large part of what we do. My office does a lot of work with Kenny, and we partner a lot on a lot of different programs and initiatives for that. And so it's really a broad range of things in a lot of different areas, but it really boils down to us being more intentional and being very aware of what we're trying to do and to take those steps to get there.
Yeah, and I know that with the faculty, why is it so important to have a diverse faculty? Because I know from kindergarten to college, a lot of times it can be inspiring to learn from someone who looks like you and know that you can do that as well. How important do you think that is?
That is very important. We believe that self-representation is very important. And I guess the best way to describe that is just for me. I came from the Black Belt, came from a majority Black town. I went to a majority white institution. And I do not believe I would have been as successful if I hadn't have found a sense of community or someone that that looked like me, who went through some of the things that I was going through, to help me to navigate campus and to help me to navigate that space and that arena, because it can be very stressful and it can be overwhelming when you're a minority, because you're dealing with a lot. And so really having someone that looks like you who has been successful, that really gives you the confidence and the courage. But then it also instills you with, you know, someone that maybe can be a mentor or who knows what you're going through to really help you through that process also. And so it really is important for our students, for our campus, for our faculty and our staff to really reflect our student body and vice versa, to make sure that we're providing our students with the best experience possible, and that having that representation to know that, you know, we're looking at it from all angles, and that that there are shared experiences throughout.
All right. And then Kenny, the next question is for you. Is there a discussion at the mayor's office to meet with community leaders to design a comprehensive plan going forward regarding race?
Well, I would say that there's always a dialogue with regards to this issue, or these issues that we're talking about. It was back in 2008, 2009 that the mayor established the Office of Multicultural Affairs, which was quite significant, I think, because to have an office that represents the diverse voices of the community as a part of your municipal government sends a signal to your community that you want to be better, that you want to be inclusive, that you want to be responsive to the people who live there, that you want to be representative. And so we always have those conversations. The thing that I'm always encouraging people to do is to build relationships with others, to be proactive in terms of their engagement, get to know our leaders, get to know our law enforcement officials, get to know our academic people, because it's a lot easier to work through challenges when you're working with somebody that you know, somebody that you've had a chance to spend some time with. And so we're always having those conversations. We had 2 large groups in this week talking with them about how they, or what their vision is for the city and how they can work alongside of us. They're going to come by about once a quarter to continue that conversation. We've had some conversation with some academic leaders. I had a huge Zoom call last week that LATERRICA was on, and there were about 25 to 26 thought leaders around the community who are all engaged in issues of social justice and community building. The Human Relations Commission met just this morning, and we were talking about ways that we can work together with an initiative called the Huntsville Area Inclusive Communities Initiative. And so there's a lot of stuff going on. There's no shortage of opportunities, again, in the midst of adversity, but we don't want to be reactive to things. We want to set the stage and set the table so that we have a community where people feel they have a voice and where people feel that they're represented. And in those instances where people feel that they have been marginalized, oppressed, or abused, that we elevate their voice to listen to what they have to say and connect with their heart, not just talk to their heads, but connect with their heart, because there's a feeling component involved with all of this. But then once we get past the feelings, we want strategic movement in a positive and productive direction.
I like that. Thank you, Kenny. And then the next question is for Captain McCarver. We know that Huntsville's population is around 30% African American. How diverse is the police department?
Well, I'll tell you, we're not as diverse as we want to be. That's a absolute fact. While currently, I pulled the numbers today, we're currently at about 16.5% minority in our department. And unfortunately, even lower in the female side. It's really tough to get females to come into the law enforcement field. We only have 7.3% female. But here's the bright side. Over the course of the last 5 years, every single one of our academy classes has actually matched or been better than the same ratio in our community. So we've been kind of ranging between 27 and 35% over the last 4 years. It just takes a lot of time. It takes time to get to where we want to be. We have really increased the amount of effort. 85% of our recruitment efforts go into minority recruiting. And, we, with the decrease in the unemployment numbers, when it got low, it became even harder to recruit minorities. And so it is a real struggle. We face it. Our numbers are probably similar to LATERRICA's there at UAH. I think we all face the same thing. But law enforcement is really got an uphill battle. And so you know, while those numbers are not something we can, you know, we want to jump up and down about, because we need to do a lot better. We do feel comfortable, or you know, we feel like we're making strides in the right direction right now. But I always like to, whenever this question comes up, I always love to throw this out there and ask you guys as leaders in our community, if you have something better, or if you have a suggestion, or you know of somewhere that we can go to help be better recruiters, please give us a call. You know, we go to our boys and girls clubs, our colleges, our military installations. We do all sorts of things to recruit and find the right people. But you know that we can always do better. And so if you've got something for us, let us know.
Okay. Well, look, guys, social media is blowing up. So I've got a question for Officer Stevens. A viewer wants to know, are there any mental health training things that HPD does with their recruits? Actually,
Yes, one of the things that we've started in the last year, Johnny Hollingsworth, or Officer Hollingsworth, was real good at getting out, getting information, and getting us a program together. We're one of the first in the state to have it. What they do is they're requiring each officer to have in the academy, I believe it's 16 hours of training now, or it might be 8, but I believe it's 16. Originally, the chief's plan is to get up to where every officer has 40 hours of mental health training. What this does, it gives us an opportunity to recognize some of the behavior and give us an idea of what we might want to do with it. You know, how we can, a lot of the mental health hospitals and stuff are closing down. So we've got to figure out a way that we can do better and help these people out.
Okay. And also, yes, Captain.
Yeah, I just want to throw in there that we have also added, we do training specific to Alzheimer's and autism as well. So they get that training on top of the CIT training. We believe that's incredibly important right now to make sure that we can identify and understand those that may be having problems in those regards. And so we've increased the training.
And another one we got for either Officer Stevens or Captain DEWAYNE is, how many disciplinary actions are officers allowed before they're fired?
Well, so that's a really broad question, because it depends on what the disciplinary action is for. You know, you can have some things you can get fired on the first time. And so, you know, but there are some things that, you know, we kind of progress. For instance, just as an example real quick, if you forget to turn your body camera on, right, that's a tough one, because that's a very serious thing. Right? If you forget to turn your body camera on, it can look, even though you may have just accidentally done that, it can look really bad, right? It looks like maybe you intended to do something with that body camera off. So we're pretty tough on that one. And if you were to do that too many times, you would certainly be able to face termination. But you know, you have to start and you have to progress it. So we usually start with an oral reprimand and then move up to a written and then suspensions on something like that. However, if an officer were to do something like, you know, not turn in drugs or, you know, heaven forbid, steal something, well, then they're fired immediately. There is no progressiveness in something like that. So I hope that answered the question.
All right. Thank you for that. Our next question is for Mr. Kenny Anderson. What type of systematic racism do you think exists in our area, and how is it getting fixed? And we'll continue to say, I'll give you one example. Huntsville City Schools, like many, they have desegregation orders, which is that attempt to fix the system that has been in place and other systems that are being looked at.
Right. So the question of systematic racism. I'm a mental health professional, so I'm going a different direction here. The issue of systemic racism is a 400-plus-year-old problem. So we cannot expect it to be fixed overnight. What we're talking about conceptually, when we talk about systemic and institutionalized racism, we're talking about practices that are embedded in the systems of our communities that continue to oppress or marginalize Black people or people of color. In the 1950s, in response to Rosa Parks being arrested and the Montgomery bus boycott then occurring for 381 days, That was a response to the systemic racism of public transportation, where blacks were required to sit on the back of the bus. And, the list goes on and on. Today, those systems still exist. They exist in our education systems as it relates to access to education, disciplinary concerns, et cetera, et cetera. It occurs in our housing systems in terms of fair housing practices, and we still see challenges as far as that goes today. It occurs in our employment and our hiring practices, things that are embedded. Most people aren't going to tell you, we didn't hire you because you're a black person, but there are things that are embedded in the process sometimes that work against the person who happens to be a person of color. And the list goes on and on and on. Wherever you have systems in place in a community, you see systemic racism. And so when we talk about uprooting it or dismantling it, we're not talking about an immediate fix. We're talking about a cure that has been over 400 plus years in the process. And so what we need to do today is, as we have noticed as a consequence of the George Floyd murder, that the issues that are most prevalent as it relates to systemic racism must be attacked, they must be addressed, and they must be done so through coalition building. They must be done through strategic planning that holds people accountable for those actions, and some things that are sustainable in the process. In other words, we don't want to just react because a person dies in police custody. We want the processes and systems by which people are taken into custody changed. And so therefore, when we talk about, and then you apply that to education, housing, employment, everywhere you go, you want the things and the practices that are experienced by people modified, changed, removed, altered, so that those things do not take place. That is a huge challenge, but it's not something that cannot be done. It just takes the willingness of people to recognize how deeply entrenched these things are in our society, and then work towards removing and dismantling that system.
All right, we got Angela and we got LATERRICA. Angela, let's go first.
I just wanted to piggyback on that to say that the Citizens Coalition, not only are we looking at law enforcement policy on the local level, but we're sharing information and education so that the individuals that are a part of the coalition can understand that this just didn't happen overnight. But they can, we're sharing the history of criminal justice, American history in a comprehensive sense, and also just talking about organizing and being civically engaged, because all of these things intersect and overlap, and we can't address one thing without discussing it all.
Okay, LATERRICA?
Yeah, and just to follow up, and Kenny made just some really great points, and it really just brought me back to kind of some of the things that we're teaching our campus right now. And one of those is overt versus covert racism and overt versus covert white supremacy that is so deeply rooted, embedded into our society, that it's going to, I mean, those roots are deep and they're entwined and they're entangled, and some of them a lot of people may not even see or notice. And a lot of times, individuals and citizens, they may say like, oh, well, this isn't a racist policy because it's completely neutral. But, and Kenny goes back to like the hiring practices. Sure, you're not saying, I don't want Black people to work here, but when you make a policy that everyone needs straight hair or dreads aren't allowed, that's exactly what you're saying. And so those roots are really deep, because a lot of what we have in society as acceptable is really rooted in whiteness. And then a lot of what, a lot of policies and things are, rooted from the 50s and the 60s that was formed, like zoning, and the ability to own property and homes. So we're seeing the effects of those. So it's been 300, 400 years, as Kenny said. It's not going to be able to be undone overnight. And so, and then a large part of it is a lot of people are like, oh, it's the system that needs to be reworked. And that is true, but it's also each individual person. If you're a supervisor working at a job and you're making these decisions, we need you to think about what type of biases do I have that could possibly present an individual from getting this job? Or if I'm walking down the street and I see someone doing a normal everyday thing, what type of bias do I have against, say, maybe a Black person that automatically makes me think that this person is a danger? And so, yes, it is something that is going to have to be at the top, and we're going to have to dismantle these structures and rethink how we do them. But it's also going to take each individual person to really think through their thought process and kind of how do we get to this point and how to undo it. And so I just wanted to follow up on that because I thought that Kenny and Angela made a really good point about kind of what that was.
Hey, thank you for that. Now, look, let's talk about community outreach. I know lots of times I'll see, like on Facebook, on Twitter, you'll see like videos of like officers getting out and playing basketball and football with local youth, especially individuals within their community. So, Officer Stevens, can you kind of talk about HPD's community outreach and what are some of the main goals that you guys have?
One of the things about our outreach program, the chief pretty much gives us, leeway to plan events, different things. There's a ton of stuff we're involved in. We always do like a Meals on Wheels route every week. That's, we do that because we like doing it. I mean, there's no, specific reason why we do it. We like reaching out to those people. We've also helped the North Alabama Food Bank a lot lately. The department also offers the Citizens Advisory, not the Citizens Advisory, Senior Academy, which we do that a lot. There's plenty of programs we have that we're always trying to get out to do something in the community. And the reason we're doing it is because, it's not that we're made to do this stuff. We just like doing it. We really enjoy getting out, being with the people in the community.
Awesome. All right, we got some group questions. Connor, I'll let you start with those now.
Yeah,
when I say group questions, I say group questions, basically, we'll ask them anybody, free range. You can go ahead and deliver that answer.
Yeah, these are kind of our final 3 questions before we wrap up, since we're cutting it close on time now. This one may be a little touchy, but the Confederate statue has been, go on social media. Everyone's talking about it. Go walk around downtown. People are protesting it. Why do you think people are so upset by this, and what kind of emotions can this bring up for people?
The Confederate monuments, whether they're here in Huntsville on the public square at the courthouse, or whether they are scattered around parts of the South, are offensive to Black people. They represent a time in which Black people were considered property, could be bought or sold, could be oppressed in a variety of ways. And it also represents a traitorous part of our national history. That is what happened in the Civil War. We sometimes forget that. A part of our nation decided that they didn't want to be subjected to laws that fought to keep people from being enslaved. And so rather than do that, they decided to secede from the Union and fight a war against their own people. They lost the war. And I don't really get into who lost and who gets to say the victory. I'm simply saying that if these things are in a person's face, it is important for people, if we're going to have and create a society and a culture where people are respectful, where people are treated in a way that there's dignity, and people are being honorable and recognizing the deep-seated roots of where these things come from, then it's time that they be removed. Now, whether that's to a museum, to a Civil War cemetery, wherever it goes, it doesn't need to be in the public space. That's what this issue is all about. And that's what you see being done right here in Huntsville. That's where you see the Madison County Commission voting for this to happen. That's where you see the Huntsville City Council voting for this to happen. That's where you see groups like the Committee 100, Downtown Huntsville Inc., a large clergy group that have asked for this to be removed. And that's why we that say the monument needs to be moved stand in unison as far as that's concerned, because of the deep-rooted history associated with that.
And then, of course, we know there is the Memorial Preservation Act for 2017. I know Mobile, I believe they paid $25,000 to actually have theirs moved to museum. And I know that's something
Mhm.
you're talking about, is putting it somewhere like a museum or a cemetery.
Yeah, that's an option. So
Yeah. Okay, and then Mo, do you want to go to the next question?
Sure thing. This is for anyone. It's more of a broad range question. What do you as individuals think that the city of Huntsville is doing right? And how can we enhance these things to add to the positives?
Well, I want to jump in because I believe that as far as, on my part of this is with the police department, being a part of the city of Huntsville, I believe that so much of what we do is fantastic, and what we probably do poorly is talk about the things that we do that are right. When we, a lot of the things that have come out as requests for law enforcement, we've been doing those, but unfortunately, people don't know that. And again, back to Angela's comment about, the public being able to know, what it's shown us is that what we're not doing well is communicating both directions. And so, things like the Citizens Academy, things like ride-alongs, things like the meetings we're having now, right? And we talked about, look at, this is a terrible time in some ways, but in other ways, this is a great time. We're actually making progress for the first time in my life. We're going forward. And so I believe if people will look at this as a fantastic opportunity for us as a country and as a people, as a society, to grow and actually become one the way we should be, this is it. And so, now these conversations that we're having, we've got progress going. And so let's talk about the things that we have been doing right. Let's talk about the things that we need to do right and the things that we can improve on that maybe, we're just doing. And so be proud of the Huntsville Police Department. Be proud of the officers that work here, because there are so many fantastic ones who are just as much distraught about all of this as anyone else. They take great pride in their profession and what they do. They want to do it right. And let's all work together to grow and be better together.
Yeah, and I think just having all you guys on here right now definitely is something right.
Right.
So I think that's
Angela, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I was going to just piggyback off of that and say that the citizens of Huntsville have, the entire area have responded in a way that says that we want to be the model of a authentic community policing model, to continue to show that we're diverse and that we can get along. We don't just tolerate each other, but that we accept one another. So I think that's wonderful. And it's not just about quote unquote bashing the police or just pointing out what hasn't been done, but also advocating for officers, because they do have a highly stressful job, and we need to make sure that they're taken care of well so that they can help to protect and serve us well and also recruit well.
All right, we got a few more minutes. Kenny, can we get something from you? And then I saw Officer Stevens as well. Just quick statements.
Real quick, I want to encourage people to utilize the access that you have to your elected officials. I come from a city of 8 million people, and I could never have imagined meeting the mayor, meeting the city council representatives. You have direct access to these individuals. You can reach out to them, talk about what you're thinking about. You can reach out to me as an appointed official and talk about what do you want. One of the things that I love about Huntsville is that if something is here that's great, we can build on it. But the imagination that exists in a city that sent people to the moon, if you have something in mind that you'd like to see happen, just let us know. Talk about it. Suggest it. Let's figure out how we make it happen. I'm always understanding that there's pressure, there's frustration, there's emotion. But on the same time, we got to kind of release the ballast a little bit and say, okay, in the midst of all of that, what is it that I want to do? Instead of just simply saying, what is it that you're going to do? So if you have good ideas, if you have thoughts that you need to work through, if you have processes that you'd like to see put in place, reach out to us. We're available to you. And reach out to me. I'm available to you and more than willing to talk to you at any time about anything.
All right, Officer Stevens, then we're going to go to our final question.
Just Huntsville's a great place. It is. We're very diverse. There's a lot of great things in Huntsville. I just would encourage everyone to take the time, enjoy life, do something good for other people, especially right now, because we all need something good. That's about it.
Very good advice. And our last question, kind of a bigger one. How do you remove hate? And what would you like to see be done going forward?
I think first we have to come to terms with the source of those hates, and that means talking about our past, as ugly as it sometimes may be, and really addressing that and figuring out how we can undo some of those things in that past. But then also, you know, I work in higher ed, and I believe in the power of education. I believe in the power of exposure. So, and as the city of Huntsville, one of our greatest assets is our diversity and our ability to educate our citizens. I know that, you know, Kenya and I work together on the Future and Beyond conference with both of our departments. And so it's things like that that really expose, whether it's businesses or community leaders or just citizens within Huntsville, about the issues going on and having those tough conversations, but also we have to expose people to people that do not look like them, because, and we have to use those I statements. That's something that I've, you know, as a professional, sometimes I used to just try and keep it very neutral and very general, but I'm learning now, like, I statements matter a lot. And so building those relationships and sharing my experiences, sometimes it gets, you know, it's traumatic, and I don't want to be that person. So also, you know, other people have to be proactive about seeking that information. And we're living in an internet age where there is information, but I think that the most powerful thing we can do as a community is build those relationships and have those tough conversations and talk about our experiences to figure out how to move forward from those.
Angela.
I'm just jumping in to say that I recognize that we cannot get rid of hate. We will never eradicate hate because we're free will agents and we have choices. But we can't legislate morality like Martin Luther King Jr. said, but we can regulate behavior. And in regulating behavior, we can affect attitudes, and hopefully in affecting the attitudes, we can change hearts. We just have to be transparent and courageous, like LATERRICA said, to have the tough conversations.
Kenny?
Yeah, I love what both of the ladies said. I would add to that. I like to tell people that if your circle all looks like you, talks like you, thinks like you, and acts like you need a bigger circle. You need to step outside of yourself. You need to meet other people. You need to get to know other people. And by doing so, you will be amazed at what you don't know. I think that's what diversity, equity, and inclusion is all about. It's about stretching ourselves and learning about those zones, those areas, those spaces that we are suspicious of, that we don't understand, that look mysterious to us. And those spaces are occupied by people who are different, who come from all kinds of different and very powerful experiences. It is a great way to enhance our understanding of the world in which we live, just by simply expanding our circle. And I'm not talking about going out and make 4, 5, 10 different friends. Just start within your own community. Start on your job. Start in your house of faith if you are a person of faith. Get to meet one person different from you, and make sure that person is different in terms of some demographic, their age, where they come from, what their educational status is, socioeconomic status, so that you get to know the richness of our society, and it will minimize our ability to hate what we don't understand or what we don't know.
Definitely some great advice. I saw Captain McCarver's hand go up.
Yeah, and I don't want to be redundant, but it's you know, when you learn to love someone who doesn't look like you, you find that commonality. When you begin to realize that it doesn't matter that you know what your skin color is, the same things make us afraid. The same things make us sad. You know, when you look at a child and you see the pain in the child, you can relate to that. Well, we have to learn to relate to those kinds of pains in everyone around us. And I believe that's how we get past it. You have to find common ground is really what it is. And we have common ground. We're all the same. We all have the same hurts and feelings, and learn to love somebody who doesn't look just like you. And that's how we get.
Definitely. And then do you guys have any final thoughts? We're going to wrap up, but if you want to say any last things, this is the time.
I just want to say thank you for convening this forum. I think that is important and essential that people have these kinds of conversations. For those who have been viewing the conversation, I want you all to understand that this is just a small piece of the dialogue. And I would encourage you to perhaps take this opportunity and share it with other people in your own circles of influence. And that way you'll be able to expand the conversation. We can't solve all the issues here. We don't think alike. We don't have all the resources, but together we can move the needle forward. So I hope that you'll take advantage of doing that. So thank you again for providing this forum for us.
I wanted to say thank you too, and that moving from tolerance toward a place of acceptance, even with flaws and differences, is key. And that, again, if we just can, I thank you for allowing the citizens to be represented here, just an everyday person. And that's what it takes, recognizing everyone and their significant value, because we do come from different places, but we do also have commonalities. So just recognizing that and being okay with that means a lot.
Definitely. Well, I just want to thank, or you want to go?
I was just going to say thank you as well, and to reiterate that the police department is nothing more than an extension of everyone else out there. We are all one, and we beg you to come and bring us your concerns, bring us what we can do, because we want to be better, and we really want to be a department that you trust and you can be proud of.
Yeah, LATERRICA.
And I was just going to say thank you for inviting me and for representation at UAH to be a part of this conversation. I know that we're willing to do our part on our end to continue to help make Huntsville, and then especially also our university, an even better place to live and learn. So
Awesome.
Yeah,
Officer
just
Stevens,
thank
you
you
want
to
to throw
all of
something
you.
there?
No, I'm just laughing. My daughter came in here, started throwing her hands around everywhere. But anyway,
Okay.
laughing.
From
But,
home life.
yeah, thanks guys for having us on there. We really appreciate the opportunity to get out here and talk to the people. Actually, I believe that tomorrow there's a council meeting and we will be out front. So if anybody's there, please come up and talk to us. We'll be glad to talk to you about whatever you want to talk to. We enjoy these tough conversations. It makes us better persons. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, we really do appreciate all of you coming on to talk about this. And I know I learned a lot during this conversation. I hope our viewers learned a lot. And it was very constructive, good conversation. So thank you to all of you.
Absolutely. And everyone watching online, hey, we appreciate you watching and sending in your questions. We hope we were able to get a lot of these questions answered from our wonderful panel and whatnot. And hopefully we might be able to come around and do this again. So once again, thank you for tuning in online, on our website, on Facebook, and be sure to tune in tonight on WZDX News at 9 for basically a recap of this. And hopefully we'll be able to do this once again very, very soon. Enjoyed you all. Everybody have a great night.
Thank you.
Hey, Eden. Hey, Ezra.